All right, starting to come back now. And before I hand it over to Andy to talk through, some of you might be wondering, like, because essays is a very popular topic, and I think everyone's most interested in that. Why are we only allocating 15 minutes to go through this essay? Uh, well, I think the intent here is to simulate a little bit of what the review process is like. And in reality, Andy probably has less than 15 minutes, probably closer to 5 minutes, maybe, to go through an essay to get an impression to get notes down. So a lot of this is intended to just give a sense of what questions Andy is wondering about, comments that he has as he reads through an essay. Um, but yeah, Andy, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And it depends on the school, of course, right? When you're talking about schools like USC, UC Berkeley, Duke, and Michigan, they're getting thousands upon thousands of applications, and unfortunately, there's just not enough time to go through each application and spend an hour on each of them, right? And so places a lot of emphasis on sharing a great personal statement that allows us to get to know you as much as possible and as quickly as possible, right? So I have not read this beforehand, right, Fayon? You can confirm that, right? And but I can tell this probably isn't ChatGPT generated just right off the bat. It doesn't seem like can you confirm that?
I So true story. This is based off of my old UCLA essay. So ChatGPT learned based off of my actual essay. So this is
Okay.
something within the neighborhood of what I applied to UCLA
Okay, got it, got it.
with.
Yeah, I was like, they didn't have ChatGPT when we were growing up, right? Um, so th this first off, is this 500 words? This seems
This is some around 350. So this is
350, right? Yeah, just looking at it, it seems a little bit on the shorter end. I can just kind of tell. Um, Now, I think for me, I talked about how in the beginning, I'm not a big proponent of sharing kind of like a mini autobiography, right? And just from reading this, the first part, being born and raised in SF, and I guess we're getting kind of like an introduction to your background, right? Your cultural background, right? And I imagine that you're going to talk about how that's going to transition into or has impacted or undergirded your motivations in the future. Um, and now I'm reading the next paragraph right now about, let's see, value of hard work and perseverance, and your dad building a business from scratch, and your mom working long hours as a nurse, and how that has motivated you, I think, right? Their sacrifices, right? This part is okay. The first part is also just okay. This part is okay. I think right here you're kind of setting the tone, right? You're setting the tone about your environmental background, your familial background, your cultural background, right? And then also your personal background, right? Because how your parents' sacrifices have influenced you. And I like that part, right? Tying about having this kind of external motivation, this intrinsic drive, right? And in your case, Fayon, it's because you saw your parents do it, and you really wanted to, I guess, kind of justify all their sacrifices. I imagine is kind of like why you wrote this. So, yeah, good, right? We're tying in some aspect, right? And explaining how, or sorry, explaining your motivations because of your parents' sacrifices. Um, and then the next thing is high school was a unique challenge. As someone passionate about technology, I often felt I needed to be in tune with my love for coding. Okay. Okay. Now, Fan, let me ask you, what did you apply to your major at UCLA?
At the time I applied material science engineering. So
Yeah, I probably would have guessed that just from this paragraph, reading this paragraph, that you're applying to something engineering. And that's why you talk about you're passionate about technology, you talk about your coding, your robotics, right? And your experience with starting the first robotics club at your high school and kind of what you learned from that. I think that's fine, right? I know there is a question about like, should we use personal statements to talk about our major? I'm always torn between that. And the reason why is sometimes I feel like, yeah, you can talk about your major, but is your major your identity, right? Is being an engineer, is being a STEM person, is that your identity? Is that who you are? And if it's not, then I don't recommend talking about your major and your personal statement. If your personal statement and your major, those two things are inextricably linked, then yeah, talk about it, right? Because that's who you are, your core. But if you're not, you know, if you're not the Fei Yang, the engineer, right, and you're just Fei Yang, then you should just talk about, you don't need to talk about your major, is what I'm trying to say here. And also, um, again, nothing personal, right, Fei Yang? This is me
No, no,
just,
you're hitting the nail on the head. Honestly, like,
okay.
yeah, spoiler alert for those at home, it was not. It was
Yeah,
not who I was. So
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. Also, I feel like this paragraph right here may have came from another essay you were writing, and you stuck it in here. Obviously I don't have no idea, but it kind of sounds like that, right? It doesn't flow as well because you were talking about kind of like your parents and who are immigrants, right? And really having that sense of drive because you saw your parents have that sense of diligence, right? And then you just jump straight to kind of how high school was a challenge, right? So there was not that easy flow, easy transition between talking about your family and what undergirds your motivation and just talking about, hey, I'm also passionate about technology, by the way. So this doesn't feel like it belongs necessarily here. Um, and then the next thing you're talking about, jumping to your Chinese cultural background, right, and how that's been a guiding force for you, and um, yeah, and then the last sentence really there, right? The last part of that sentence is really being driven to honor your parents' sacrifices by giving it your all, and right, you can kind of see how that sentence or that paragraph right there probably should move up, right, and go right after the second paragraph. I feel like it belongs there better, and it fits there better as well. And for me, that I, I'm not too certain that that essay, sorry, that specific highlighted paragraph is any different actually than kind of the first two paragraphs already. You're kind of reiterating the same thing um, as well. And the next one is standing at the threshold of this next chapter. I feel with a sense of purpose and excitement. I think the future where I leverage my CS skills. Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, so I now I can kind of see why you did talk about the technology aspect because you're trying to tie it in with your sense of purpose, right? And your future, right? So your sense of purpose being, yeah, I want to make sure I'm doing everything to justify my parents' sacrifices, but also look, like um I see a future where I'm applying my CS skills or my engineering skills or my interests to help create a better world. And that second sentence right there, I envision a future where I leverage my computer science skills to solve real world problems. That's probably a sentence that I have read 3,000 times. There's
just 3,000. I'd expect it to be more.
Yeah, we don't, I don't read all just engineers, right? Or stuff like that, but there's a variation of that sentence, right? Is I see a future or I dream of a future or, in after I graduate, I want to be able to contribute to society by solving the most, I don't know, whatever, unsolvable problems or whatever, intractable problems, whatever there's always a sentence like that. So I would probably honestly, Faye, I probably would just roll my eyes if I, saw that.
No, same. I've also read that. Maybe not in, 3,000, but definitely, when I read in last time I read in 2021,
Yeah,
probably a few hundred at least.
yeah. I'm eager to immerse myself. Yeah, that last sentence right there, that doesn't tell us much, right? I mean, I already know that a student wants to do that, right? You're applying to a top school or any college, really, any college, right? You should be able to be excited about joining a rigorous academic environment, right? Collaborating with professors and other students, right? And not everybody wants to contribute to groundbreaking research, but you get the idea, right? Like that's already a given. That's implied already. And let's see. In conclusion, my journey has been a testament to resilience, community, and the pursuit of passion. My diverse experiences have prepared me to embrace. Okay. Okay. See, I like that second sentence right there. My diverse experiences have prepared me to embrace the challenges and opportunities that's kind of in line with what I was talking about with that story of the student being on a plane, right? And blacking out, right? They were able to talk about how their experience has prepared them for the challenges ahead. Now, I'm not necessarily sure that this specific essay here did a great job of going in depth with what those diverse experiences are and how they have prepared you for the challenges and opportunities ahead, right? I think if you had gone more in depth with your upbringing and maybe talking about how you actually, applied the working hard and making sure my parents' sacrifices, my family sacrifices are justified, and here's how I do that, right? I think if you went down that path, I think it would have been a more impactful essay. I would have said this one just tells me like, okay, now I know why you're interested in robotics, right? Because I mean, I guess you didn't really talk about how you got interested in technology, or how you developed your love for coding robotics, right? And I probably would have appreciated that as well. So, if you are gonna tie it in at the end, and this is not obviously this is for anybody, if you're gonna tie it in at the end with how your diverse experiences have prepared you for the future, you should be talking about that versus I think this one is just kind of like laying like this is like a resume that I'm reading here. Like, oh, okay, I don't know, San Francisco, location San Francisco, founder of robotics club, right? And did so and so with this, right? Assembling circuits and debugging codes or whatever it is, right? And was president of that, and then talking about, maybe you're involved in your Chinese school, right? That can go on a resume, right? And so a lot of this is just kind of reiterating a resume, I think, in my opinion. But hey, you got into UCLA, of course, but I think, yeah, this one wouldn't be as impactful for me versus if you had just gone down the route of why engineering, or you had just gone down the route of here's how my family sacrifices and my upbringing and their experiences have shaped the person I am and the person I want to become. But I think this one you're trying to do both. And in just 350 words, you're not going to be able to accomplish that cleanly.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Andy. I think like you actually your feedback is very nice compared to my own like feedback when I was like rereading it. I'm like, dude, my essay's freaking trash. Like I'm on the record. I don't think I would not have gotten into UCLA in 2024 with specifically we're talking about my essays, right? I think a lot of what I noticed is again reiterating, right? Like just kind of repeating, trying to I think at the time I was trying to really hammer this message home, but in reality, it's not all that helpful. It's just kind of like, okay, I've read this part. Um, and then something else, just for context, all applications, as you probably can guess, you're reading it within the context of everything else, right? Everything else that the student has done. Admissions officers are never, like this exercise being parachute dropped into into like reading this essay. And but by this point you'll have seen the classes that what I name my student Nick Liu. You'll see what classes Nick has taken. You'll see like the activities they're involved with. So none of what you see in the essay should be a surprise. You should kind of like expect it a little bit, but it should also like add value. um
Yeah.
in terms of I think like adding value, you mentioned, Andy, the specificity, right? Like just for example here, I discovered a community that celebrated innovation and creativity. Okay, so what, like what does that actually mean, right? What's an example of your community doing something innovative or doing something creative. And I think that's something that this
Yeah.
doesn't go into.
Yeah. If I may just share one more thing, a lot of this essay, I can take out certain words or certain phrases and fill it in, and it would still make sense. For example, I can, instead of San Francisco at the very top, I can put in New York City or LA, right? And it would still make sense. I can take out, anywhere that says Chinese American heritage or Chinese heritage and put in Korean American or Ethiopian or whatever, right? And it would still likely make sense, right? I can take out my love for coding and robotics, or I founded my first robotics club, right? I could take that out and put it in with my love for journalism or whatever, my love for Key Club. I founded the first Key Club, right? It would still make sense, right? Maybe not the debugging and coding, but I could talk about something else, right? Through countless late nights, I don't know, like working on my debate topics for speech and debate or model UN, right? It would still make sense. Right. So yeah, that's really important. The specificity part of it, really getting in depth and thinking about like, why am I sharing this? What's the purpose of me sharing this? Am I just sharing this because I just want you to know who I am? Right. Well, I can kind of get that from your resume, from your activity summary, right? So I feel like your personal statement should really get at who you are. Right, that's the important part about who you are and the essence of who you are and sharing that. And you can share that in a creative way. You can share that by just telling us one story, an experience, and giving us a lot of insight into you because of that one. Because if you're just talking about one experience and you get 500 words to talk about this experience, yeah, you're going to be able to go in depth, right? But if you're trying to condense 18 years of your life down into just 500 words, it's going to be too general and it's going to be way too broad. And my last advice, and sorry if I'm going over time, Theon, my last kind of thing is I don't count against a student, but it's just a little bit more difficult to read when you don't have like delineated paragraphs, right? Defined paragraphs, and you just have one big blob, right? And blob is BLOB, and that's just like a big old paragraph, right? Like it's just going to be a long read. It's going to be inherently not interesting and hard for the admissions officer to read your 500 words if it's just one huge text block and not broken up, kind of like this particular essay did a good job of.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I think the last thing that I'll chime in before we kind of move on to the last segment is people like Andy who, are in this tough position of not just evaluating or trying to get a sense of who the applicant is in this moment in time. They're also trying to imagine their potential like 2 years, 4 years down the line. Like, who is this student going to be once they come to Berkeley? How are they going to interact with those students? And something that Andy has been touching on throughout this talk is like who the student is, their values, their intrinsic motivations for doing the things that they do. And that's so important because, in my opinion, I think that's a better indicator of their potential and how they're going to grow, in the coming years. Because a lot of students can do stuff, and in fact, a lot of essays kind of read like a recap, right? Like, what is it? Instead of retreating, I founded this robotics club. I spent these late nights. I discovered a community. Like, this is basically, yeah, this is like it's like a recap. I did this, I did this, I did this, then I realized this. But just these actions, just telling an admissions officer you did all these things, it doesn't speak to the core of, okay, who you are. Like, why did you choose this? Obviously at any given moment we have infinite options. Why did you choose to do this rather than anything else, right? Why did I found robotics club rather than anything else? And by the way, this is an interesting example because at a time when I applied to engineering, I actually did not do anything like founding a robotics club or anything like that. So this is actually a stronger example than what I applied with.
Got it.
But
Got
yeah,
it.
I just thought that was funny. I don't know why ChatGPT, gave me the benefit of the doubt in that sense, but maybe
You know,
maybe like my original essay didn't make enough sense. So I wanted to do me solid.
no, and there's one thing you said there, but it's yeah, we're trying to envision how you're gonna contribute to our campus, right? And why this essay is going to help us why decide that you're a better fit for our university. And I like and I appreciate when a student talks about their external drives, right? Like, or their intrinsic motivation, right? You know, if you're driven to succeed because you saw your parents sacrifice, or you saw your friends sacrifice, or whatever the case, or you're really inspired by, this world leader, whatever the case may be, that is going to serve you better than just saying that, hey, well, right now as a 17-year-old, I'm interested in coding, but who knows, when I'm 19, I might not be. Or when I first take that engineering class or that programming class, you know what, this is not a good fit for me. And right, so that can all change. But generally, if you're motivated and inspired by something like seeing your parents' sacrifices, right, that's not going to change during your time at Michigan or at Berkeley, nor is it probably going to change after your time in college, right? And that's going to serve you better than just talking about your interest in coding and robotics. So, um, yeah.
So thanks so much for going through this exercise. I know it's a little different, a little outside the box than maybe what admissions officers usually do. So thanks for bearing with me, man. So at this time, we're going to transition over to the last part of our programming, which is our student-led Q&A. But before I bring that up, I'm going to go ahead and just pull up this slide here. If you want more updates and more get updates on events like this, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. You can see a QR code in the bottom left corner. And then I'll just leave this up for now while we do the Q&A. And I'll pass it off to Julia and Jeffrey to call on students both in chat. I saw Jonathan, you raised your hand as well.